Hey all, today we're going to talk more about lines in the coordinate plane, and this time we're going to talk about the relationship between perpendicular lines in the coordinate plane. So here's a quick visual of what we talked about last class, parallel lines in the coordinate plane. You can probably tell from this picture that these two lines are never going to intersect each other. They have the same slope, which is what happens when two lines are parallel in the coordinate plane. Over here is a picture of perpendicular lines. So two perpendicular lines are two lines that intersect each other. So we can see that they intersect right here, and the unique part about that intersection is that they create four right angles. So I've shown one of the right angle boxes here, but all four angles are 90 degrees. So when two lines intersect and they form 90-degree angles, we call them perpendicular. So in order for two lines in the coordinate plane to be perpendicular, we need to know two things about their slopes. So a little bit more to it than parallel lines. They have opposite signs, so that means the slope of one of the lines is positive and the slope of the other one is negative. And they're reciprocals of each other. So that means if we write one of them as a fraction and flip it, that would be the slope of the other line. So these two things both have to occur for us to say that the lines are perpendicular in the coordinate plane. So let's try an example like we did with parallel lines. Let's see if these lines are perpendicular. So we'll find the slope of each line. So here's the slope of AB using the slope formula. We'll find that the slope of AB is -2. We'll find the slope of CD. We'll find it to be 1/2. So now we need to compare these two slopes to determine whether or not line AB and line CD are perpendicular if we graph them. So number one, do they have opposite signs? Yes, they do. The slope of AB is negative, the slope of CD is positive. So number one is good. We need to see if they're flipped fractions. They are flipped fractions because if we look here at the slope of AB, -2 is the same as -2 over 1. So 2 over 1 and 1 over 2, they are the opposite. They're flipped fractions. They're reciprocals. So these two lines are perpendicular. That means if we were to graph them, if we were to graph AB and CD, they would intersect and they would form four right angles. Try another one, given the equations of two lines to see if they're perpendicular. We have to solve for y, get these things in the slope-intercept form so that we can pull the slope out of the equation and compare them. So if we solve the first one for y, we get this equation in slope-intercept form, and we find that the slope is 1/3 or 1/3, positive. We'll do the same thing for the second one. And we'll find that the slope is -1/3. So let's compare these two slopes to determine if they're perpendicular. They do have opposite signs. The one in orange is positive, the one in purple is negative. So step one is good. But they are not flipped fractions. They both are 1/3. They just have different signs. So we cannot say that these are perpendicular. If you were to graph these two lines would eventually intersect at some point, but they wouldn't create right angles, so they're not perpendicular lines. I want you to pause here, use the previous example, use some examples that we did when the lines were parallel, and determine if these two are perpendicular. So we're going to solve each of them for y's to get them in slope-intercept form, and then pull out their slope. So the first one, we find a slope of -1/3. The second one, when we solve, we get a slope of 3. Now just to note that having a slope of 3 is the same as having a slope of 3/1. You don't have to write it that way, but you need to know that that exists. So when we compare them, we see that they do have opposite signs. I have a negative here and a positive on this side. And they are flipped fractions. They're reciprocals of each other, 1 over 3 and 3 over 1. So these are two perpendicular lines. That means if we graph them, they intersect and they make right angles. So 2 you-dos for you to do. Use your notes to help you as a guide, and make sure you submit your answers using the Google form.